I had blood infections that I got to take medicine for the rest of my life for. And I feel like I'm already.
But I got took into a detox place, and it was really just a mental place, and I was like, what the hell?
We have no money, no anything, and we got stuck at a gas station. I was on the streets, I guess. Kind of got an infection in my eye.
My mom, she can't afford to help me out. You know, she can't even help herself out right now.
Make sure you can trust people you're with. Don't just trust anyone.
Phoenix is built around surviving the desert. Air-conditioned cars, air-conditioned homes, stores, offices, cooling centers, places designed to keep the heat outside. But for people living on these streets, there may be no outside to escape from. A bottle of water can become a lifeline. A patch of shade can decide where someone spends the next hour. And when addiction, exhaustion, or illness enters the picture, the danger can rise fast. This is not only a story about homelessness. It is about what happens when street survival collides with a Phoenix summer, and why getting through one more day can become the entire plan. Phoenix can look like a city built to outrun the desert. Wide highways cut through new developments, glass towers rise above downtown, and air conditioning makes daily life possible for millions of people. But there is another Phoenix that is much harder to see from inside a car. On a single night in January 2026, 7,335 people were counted experiencing homelessness across the city. More than 4,000 were in shelters, another 3,093 were counted in unsheltered situations, on streets, in vehicles, in makeshift camps, or other places never meant to be homes. Those numbers matter. But they still do not show what one night outside can feel like when the sun comes back up. For someone with a locked door, Phoenix heat can be something to escape between the parking lot and the next air-conditioned room. For someone living outside, the heat can shape almost every decision: where to sit, how far to walk, when to move, where to find water, and whether there will be shade when it is needed most. And this is where the crisis becomes more complicated. Phoenix has increased shelter use and reduced the number of people counted unsheltered compared with last year. That is real progress. But thousands are still outside. And to understand why surviving these streets remains so difficult, we first have to understand how people end up here at all. There is no single road into homelessness in Phoenix. For some people, the first break is financial. A rent increase arrives, work hours disappear, a medical bill drains what little savings are left, and one missed payment becomes two. At first, the fall may not look like homelessness at all. Someone sleeps on a friend's couch, then in a car, then in a motel for a few nights when there is money. Each step can feel temporary until the temporary places run out. Across the Maricopa region, officials still point to high rental costs, limited affordable housing, and gaps in supportive services, including mental health care and long-term care for older adults, as factors that continue to push people toward homelessness. But housing pressure is only one part of the story. For some people, substance use begins before they lose housing. For others, it becomes worse after they are already outside. Mental health problems can make holding a job, keeping appointments, replacing identification, or navigating assistance more difficult. And once someone is sleeping outside, every setback can become more expensive. A lost phone can mean missing a call from a caseworker. A stolen backpack can mean losing medication or identification. A broken down car can erase the last private place someone had to sleep. That is why the line between being housed and being homeless is not always a dramatic moment. Sometimes it is a chain of ordinary problems arriving faster than a person can recover from them. Phoenix itself acknowledges that prevention has to be part of the response. Its 2026 homelessness strategy calls for earlier intervention, housing-focused services, behavioral health coordination, and support designed to keep people from becoming homeless in the first place. And the longer someone remains outside, the harder simple recovery can become, because each day demands time and energy just to stay safe. Still, once that chain reaches the street, Phoenix adds another pressure that can change everything. Because losing housing here does not only mean losing a bed, a bathroom, or a locked door. It can also mean facing the desert with nowhere reliable to cool down. In Phoenix, the day can become dangerous long before someone feels ready to stop moving. For people living outside, surviving the heat often starts with planning around shade. A place that feels tolerable in the morning may be exposed by noon. A bus stop, an overhang, the side of a building, or a patch of shadow under a tree can become temporary shelter. But the shade moves, and so does the person relying on it. Water becomes another calculation. How much is left? Where is the next refill? How far is it to walk? Can someone carry enough while also carrying clothes, blankets, documents, medication, or everything else they still own? Phoenix operates a network of heat relief locations during the summer, including more than 60 sites, hydration stations, extended hour cooling centers, and a 24-hour respite center at 20 West Jackson Street. The 24-hour site offers cooling space, water navigation services, and connections to shelter and other resources. Transportation assistance to heat relief locations is also available through 211 during designated hours. Those resources matter, but reaching relief is not the same experience for everyone. Even waiting for a bus or crossing a large parking lot can become another stretch of exposure. Someone who is exhausted, injured, dealing with a disability, protecting their belongings, caring for a pet, or struggling with mental health or substance use problems may have a much harder time moving across the city. Even a trip that looks short on a map can feel very different when every block is exposed to the sun. And the heat does not end when the afternoon does. Concrete asphalt walls and parking lots hold warmth after sunset. For someone sleeping outdoors, nighttime may bring less direct sun, but not necessarily real recovery. Rest can be interrupted by noise, fear of theft, security concerns, police or property restrictions, and the need to keep moving. That means the next morning can begin with a body that never fully recovered from the day before. This is what makes extreme heat different from a single bad afternoon. It can turn basic survival into a repeating cycle. Find water, find shade, protect your belongings, conserve energy, and try to make it to the next cooler place. Phoenix's own heat safety guidance emphasizes hydration and getting indoors during extreme heat whenever possible. Phoenix has built more heat response infrastructure in recent years, and the city says its network is designed to protect anyone who needs relief. But for thousands of people who are still unsheltered, the central problem remains simple. Phoenix counted 3,093 people in unsheltered situations during the 2026 pick count. You cannot take the desert out of Phoenix. And if you do not have a reliable place to go indoors, you have to survive it hour by hour. Extreme heat is dangerous by itself. But on the streets of Phoenix, heat can become even more dangerous when drugs or alcohol are part of the picture. By late July 2026, Maricopa County had confirmed 40 heat-related deaths. County data reported at that point showed substance use as a factor in 65% of those deaths, while about 1/3 involved people experiencing homelessness. Those numbers were preliminary, and the county continues updating heat deaths throughout the season. The connection is not difficult to understand. Phoenix Public Health Guidance warns that stimulants such as methamphetamine can raise core body temperature, making it harder for the body to cope with extreme heat. Depressants, including alcohol and opioids, can interfere with a person's ability to recognize symptoms of heat illness, while alcohol can also contribute to dehydration. On the street, those risks can overlap with exhaustion, limited sleep, chronic illness, dehydration, and long periods outdoors. But this is where the story needs to stay careful. Not everyone experiencing homelessness uses drugs, and substance use does not explain why thousands of people in Phoenix are without stable housing. Housing costs, income loss, health problems, family breakdown, and gaps in support all matter too. What drugs can do is make an already dangerous environment even less forgiving. Someone who is confused, sedated, overheated, or physically exhausted may not recognize how quickly their condition is getting worse. They may remain in direct sun longer than they should. They may miss the early warning signs of heat exhaustion, and if they are alone, there may be no one nearby who knows when the situation has become an emergency. That is why outreach teams become so important during the hottest parts of the summer. Workers with groups serving people on the streets carry cold water cooling supplies, information about cooling centers, and in some cases, medical assistance. Local reporting in late July described outreach crews responding to one of their busiest stretches of the season as heat-related deaths climbed. Still, an emergency response happens after danger has already arrived. The deeper question is what daily life looks like before that moment when someone is trying to protect a backpack, find the bathroom, charge a phone, get food, stay awake, and locate a safe place to sleep, all while managing the heat. Because for people living outside, survival is rarely one problem at a time. Each small problem competes for the same limited energy, attention time, and physical strength. A day on the street is built around decisions most people never have to think about. Where do you wake up? Where can you wash your face? Where do you use a bathroom without being turned away? Where can you leave your belongings for 10 minutes without worrying they will disappear? For someone living outside in Phoenix, even the simplest task can take planning. A phone needs to stay charged because it may be the only connection to a caseworker, a job family, or emergency help. Identification has to be protected because losing it can slow down applications for benefits, shelter, treatment, or housing. Medication has to survive the heat. Clothes and blankets have to be carried, hidden, or watched. And every trip costs energy. A walk to get food can mean leaving shade. A bus ride can mean waiting in the sun. A shower can depend on whether someone can reach a service center at the right time. A job interview can become harder if there is nowhere safe to store a backpack, change clothes, or sleep the night before. The street also changes how people rest. Sleep is rarely just sleep when someone is worried about theft, being moved along losing possessions, or waking up somewhere unsafe. A few bad nights can make it harder to think clearly, keep appointments, manage medication, or make the next decision. That is why homelessness can become self-reinforcing. The longer someone stays outside, the more time is spent managing immediate problems instead of solving the larger ones. Find water. Protect your bag. Charge your phone. Get food. Find shade. Find somewhere to sleep. Then do it again tomorrow. And from the outside, that routine can be easy to misunderstand. Someone may look inactive while actually spending most of the day trying to meet basic needs. The next question many viewers ask is obvious. If living outside is this difficult, why not simply go to a shelter, get a job, or enter treatment? The answer is more complicated than it sounds. If life outside is this difficult, the obvious question is, why not just go to a shelter? Phoenix has expanded shelter capacity, and the city now supports a mix of options including congregate beds, non-congregate units, senior and family shelter, transitional housing, and a safe outdoor space for people who may not be ready for indoor shelter. But the existence of a bed does not mean every person can immediately move from the sidewalk into stability. Shelter is a first step. It is not the same thing as housing. For someone trying to leave homelessness, the next challenge may be finding an apartment they can afford. In 2026, the federal fair market rent for a 2-bedroom apartment in Maricopa County is $1,839 a month. Phoenix estimates that a household would need to earn about $74,000 a year to afford that rent under the standard affordability measure. Then, there's work. Getting a job can sound like the direct solution, but applying for work requires more than willingness. A person may need a charged phone, identification, transportation, clean clothes, a place to shower, reliable sleep, and somewhere to keep belongings during a shift. Losing any one of those can turn a simple appointment into another obstacle. Treatment can be complicated in a different way. Phoenix's homelessness strategy connects shelter with behavioral health services, outreach, prevention, case management, and supportive housing, because addiction or mental health care alone may not solve the housing problem, waiting on the other side. That is the pattern that keeps appearing. A shelter bed may solve tonight. A treatment program may address substance use. A job may restore income. But if rent is still out of reach, transportation is unstable, or someone leaves a program with nowhere to live, one solution can run directly into the next barrier. Phoenix has built more pathways into help. The challenge is moving people through those pathways far enough to reach stability. And that brings us to the next part of the story, because the city is not standing still. Phoenix has spent years expanding shelter outreach, heat relief, and navigation services. The question is, what that help looks like on the ground. Phoenix's response to homelessness is not built around one program. Over the last several years, the city has added shelter beds, opened new types of temporary shelter, expanded outreach, and connected heat relief with navigation services. Since the Office of Homeless Solutions launched in 2022, Phoenix says it has invested in more than 1,200 additional shelter beds. One of the largest additions is the Phoenix Navigation Center, which includes 200 congregate beds, 80 non-congregate beds, and space for recreational vehicles. The city also operates the Safe Outdoor Space, a voluntary site with up to 200 campsites and room for about 300 people who may not be ready to enter a traditional indoor shelter. The Safe Outdoor Space is more than a place to pitch a tent. It includes meals, showers, restrooms, laundry, case management, medical services, and housing navigation. During the 2026 point-in-time count, 201 people were staying there. Heat response is another part of the system. Phoenix operates a 24-hour respite center at 20 West Jackson Street, along with more than 60 locations in the regional heat relief network. These sites provide cooling, space, water, and in some locations, navigation services and transportation connections to shelter. On paper, that is a much larger safety net than Phoenix had only a few years ago. And the 2026 numbers suggest that some of it is reaching people. The number of sheltered people counted in Phoenix rose from 3,514 in 2025 to 4,041 in 2026, an increase of 15%. That matters. A shelter bed can mean air conditioning during a dangerous night. A shower can make a job interview possible. A case manager can reconnect someone with identification benefits treatment or housing. A cooling center can interrupt a medical emergency before it becomes fatal. But those services are not the end of the story, because even as more people moved indoors, more than 3,000 people were still counted in unsheltered situations across Phoenix. The city has expanded the front door into help. The harder question is what happens to everyone still standing outside it. The 2026 count gives Phoenix a reason to say its response is making progress. More people were sheltered, fewer were counted unsheltered, and the total number experiencing homelessness stayed nearly flat. But a point-in-time count is exactly what the name suggests: a snapshot of one night. On January 27, volunteers counted people in shelters, streets, cars, parks, riverbeds, and other places across the region. In Phoenix, 3,093 people were counted in unsheltered situations that night. That is a major decline from the year before. It is also still thousands of people without a conventional roof. The count cannot describe every movement that happens before or after that single night. The Maricopa Association of Governments says the pig count is only one source used to understand homelessness. The region also relies on its homeless management information system, which records interactions with the homeless services system throughout the year. That matters because homelessness is not a fixed population. One person may enter shelter while another loses housing. Someone may move from a car into a temporary bed, then into housing. Another may leave shelter and return outside. A one-night count can show direction, but it cannot tell every story behind those movements. There is another distinction that matters. Getting someone off the sidewalk is not the same as getting someone permanently housed. A shelter bed can provide safety, cooling, meals, showers, and access to services. Those are meaningful changes during a Phoenix summer. But the regional system says there is still work to shorten the time people remain homeless and reduce how often they return. So Phoenix can be making real progress and still have a visible street crisis. Those ideas are not contradictions. They are two parts of the same picture. The city has moved more people indoors. The unsheltered count has fallen. Yet thousands still wake up without stable housing, and every hot day places pressure on those who remain outside. The next question is not whether anything is working. It is which parts of the response are actually moving people toward lasting stability. What is actually working in Phoenix? The clearest measurable change is not that homelessness has disappeared. It is that more people are getting indoors. In the 2026 point-in-time count, Phoenix recorded 4,041 people in shelter, up 15% from the year before, while the unsheltered count fell 12.6% to 3,093. The city points to expanded shelter capacity, outreach, the safe outdoor space, and navigation services as part of that progress. Since the Office of Homeless Solutions was created in 2022, Phoenix says it has invested in more than 1,200 additional shelter beds. The Navigation Center alone added 280 beds, along with meals, storage, housing, navigation, employment support, and access to physical and behavioral health services. That does not prove every program works equally well. And the shelter bed is still not permanent housing. But it does show why temporary relief matters. A person who is indoors during dangerous heat can sleep, shower, protect belongings, charge a phone, meet with the case manager, and begin solving problems that are far harder to manage from a sidewalk. Phoenix's new homelessness strategy now looks beyond simply adding beds. The plan adopted in 2026 is intended to reduce homelessness through prevention, housing-focused services, behavioral health coordination, outreach, and longer-term stability through 2029. The strongest lesson may be that no single intervention carries the whole system. Heat relief can keep someone alive today. Shelter can create safety tonight. Navigation and case management can open the next door. But lasting progress depends on whether that path eventually reaches stable housing. And for the thousands of people still outside, that final step remains the one that matters most. Before we leave Phoenix, return to the people who began this story. For one person, the answer may be water. For another, a safe place to sleep. For someone else, it may be treatment, a job, a phone call from family, or simply a room with a door that locks. That is the part statistics cannot capture. Phoenix can add shelter beds, open cooling centers, expand outreach, and reduce the number of people counted outside. Those changes matter. But for the person still carrying everything they own through the heat, progress is measured differently. Can I get through today? Can I sleep somewhere safe tonight? And will tomorrow bring me any closer to a permanent home? If you could choose one priority for Phoenix right now, more affordable housing, more addiction treatment, or stronger street outreach, which would you choose and why? Share your answer below. And if you want more documentaries about the human reality of America's homeless crisis, subscribe to Homeless Crisis News.